One of the early messages West Ham fans were receiving, loud and clear, from the West Ham board was that we were broke and that the only way to sign players was if we sold players. And that transpired when Mohamed Kudus was sold to Spurs for £54 million. And within days, our first summer signing was made, £19 million purchase of wingback El Hadji Malik Diouf. And we all thought, well, I certainly thought, that this would be the catalyst for a whole host of summer signings of several young, up and coming, talented players identified by Carl McCauley in much the same way that he was doing with Graham Potter when he was at Brighton. But not so. Now, if you're new to this channel or if you've watched me before but yet to become a subscriber, please subscribe. All the content is free. And if you enjoy the show, please hit the like button. So the whole issue of signing young up and coming players doesn't seem to be materializing, because the following two signings were Kyle Walker-Peters, 28 years of age, and of course on Saturday, the confirmation that we've signed Callum Wilson, 33 years of age. And it's all left us scratching our heads and wondering how we've gone from offering 50 odd million pounds for John Duran back in January to only being able to afford the free signing of 33-year-old injury-prone striker Callum Wilson this summer. What's happened to that 50 million back then? Well, has it disappeared into the ether? Or, as many of us have assumed, it was a phantom bid with Sullivan knowing that it would never be accepted, hence the comfort of making that bid in the first place. Now, as many of you will remind me, there's no such thing as a free signing these days. So let's say, for argument's sake, that the signing of Carl Walker-Peters and Callum Wilson has cost us around 5 mil in terms of signing on fees, agent fees, and so on. And add that to the 19 mil that we purchased Diouf on, then that should leave us with more than enough money for other signings, right? But transfer money doesn't work that way. The 54 million that we've got for the sale of Kudus can be fully recognized in our accounts for this financial year, even though we won't actually physically get all that money in the bank this year, but it counts. But we can use it to go towards player purchases. When it comes to player purchases, the price we agree will then be spread over the length of time that the player's contract is for. Which means that £54 million that we had at our disposal should go a long way towards signing several players. So, for example, the signing of Diouf, we've agreed a £19 million deal plus add-ons, but that 19 million is spread over the 5-year contract, meaning that we've only really parted with £4 or £5 million as a down payment so far this summer. Add that to the potential 5 million of signing on fees for our free players, then that means so far we've only spent about £10 million physically in this transfer window. So that should mean that there's another £44 million of the Kudus money to go. Now, next up is that we're meant to be signing John Victor, the 29-year-old Brazilian goalkeeper who plays for Botafogo. Now, our initial bid of around 6.5 million was rejected, and it's understood that we've now upped our offer to 8 million, and there's a feeling that that will be agreed. And he could be signed on a 2, maybe 3-year deal. Let's say, for argument's sake, it's a 2-year deal with an addition of an option of another year. So that 8 million will be spread over those 2 years. So there's a further £4 million paid out, or potentially paid out, this summer. So far, 4 players with a total commitment of £27 million, 19 million for Diouf, 8 million for Victor, but physically only paying out 14 million. Are you with me so far? There's a reason, there's a logic to all this, which I'll explain in a moment. So we should be left with about £40 million for player purchases. So if we have so much money, that we can spread across a number of years for player signings, why are we going for these free, older players, cheapies, and not the younger up and coming players that we made ourselves believe that we would be targeting? Or I certainly convinced myself that that's what we were going to do, especially with them, what Potter said at the end of last season about reducing the size of the squad, reducing the average age of the squad. But players like Callum Wilson don't reduce the average age of the squad. Now, if you look back at Potter's time at Brighton, he and Macaulay certainly got the young talent in that were then sold for huge profits. But they got this young talent on the backdrop of a solid foundation of established players. So perhaps there is logic to what is actually going on at the moment that we as fans don't see. Now, with Kyle Walker-Peters and Wilson in, the potential signing of 29-year-old John Victor, I would like to think that there are now potentially two big targets that we're going to sign who are going to be maybe the younger sort of age group that we're hoping for. I guess that's the Stell logic I'm applying so that I can try and understand why we've gone for the likes of Callum Wilson. Now, I know there's also going to be an argument that we've got to pay the latest down payment after making John Clare Tadebo's loan deal permanent. And that's fine. That's fair enough. We can throw that into the mix as well. And despite all the figures thrown at us, the understanding is that Tadebo's deal is £40 million, around £38 million. But that's over 5 years, just like the other signings. So that means we've already made a hefty down payment, the initial loan down payment of around 8 million. And we're making a further down payment of another 8 million this summer. So of that 40 million left from Kudus money, we're now down to 32 million, which is burning a hole in Sullivan's pocket. So the only logic I can find for bringing in these freebies and cheaper options is because we must be earmarking all of that 32 million pounds towards two big signings this summer. Now, there's one scenario. We could be bringing in two goalkeepers rather than just the one, with John Victor and maybe either Mads Hermansen or Zion Suzuki on their way for about 30 million pounds each. Now, if we sign one of them over a 5-year deal, then that means we've only got to pay out about 5 or 6 million pounds again from that 32 million left. Plenty of money still left over. But with two keepers signing, if that really is going to happen, that could spell the end for Alphonse Areola. I can't see that if we do sign two keepers, Areola will be sticking around. And maybe there's a deal in the pipeline for him to be off to, I don't know, another club, Saudi or whatever. Now, included in this first scenario that we could be getting maybe two keepers, John Victor plus another, then the other major signing has got to be a central midfielder that we all know we badly need. And of course, the names of Douglas Luiz, Harvey Elliott, Ardon Jashari, James McAtee are all still being linked. Now, the first of these three players are all valued at about 40 million pounds each, with McAtee around 30 million. And the only reason McAtee is slightly cheaper is because he's in his last year of his contract at Man City. Or the other scenario is that we're not going to buy two keepers. We're going to agree a deal on John Victor, who's going to be the backup to Areola, who will stay at the club. And then we'll just go out and buy ourselves two midfielders rather than just the one. Again, the same names, Luiz, Elliott, Jashari, McAtee, etc., are all in there. Now, if one of these two scenarios is the case, that we're now earmarking what's left of the Kudus money for two major signings, then the whole transfer strategy, bringing in players like Wilson, etc., on a free, makes plenty of sense. We're using the money elsewhere. But if it doesn't lead to that, then we've got to ask ourselves a very serious question as to what the intentions of the board of this football club are. Bringing in older established players is nothing new to Potter and Macaulay, as I've mentioned. In the first 2 seasons, when they were at Brighton, they signed players like John Veltman, who was then 28, Adam Lallana, who was then 32 at the time, Danny Welbeck, Lallana and Welbeck were free signings. Welbeck was 29 years of age. But these signings were mixed with a number of players like Moises Caicedo at 19, Adam Webster, who was only 24, and Leandro Trossard, who was also only 24. And then in their final year at Brighton, they really went for it in terms of younger players with the signings of Mark Cucurella, who was only 23 at the time, Abdullah Sima, who was only 20, and Enoch Mwepu, who was only 23. And maybe, just maybe, that's the stance that's being taken at West Ham. Maybe that's what we're seeing materialize. But it's only going to materialize if after Diouf and now Walker Peters and now Callum Wilson, it's only going to materialize if the next player we sign is one of these young players, a young keeper or a young midfielder, etc. So we're hopeful, I guess, that that's what's going to happen. But if we do not get a young keeper, or if we do not get a young, more dynamic midfielder, what then? If we don't, then I'll be asking the same question I've asked before as to what's the point of having paid compensation to nab Macaulay from Chelsea, and why bother with all this data-driven analysis for our scouting system? I'm hoping that if we do get Victor with Hermansen or Suzuki or one of the young talented midfielders over the line, then this will all be worth it, and this will all make sense. In the meantime, with Wilson's arrival, the only thing fans can hope for is that he proves us all wrong. It's a 1-year deal, heavily incentivized, as I've mentioned before, with suggestions that he will be on a mere £6,000 a week, plus add-ons, 90% of them, which will earn him anything up to £50,000-60,000 a week. If that's really the case, then great. Graham Potter was positive, as of course he's got to be, hasn't he? He's now, Wilson is now one of Potter's players. Potter has said, we're getting Wilson in, who's proven, experienced Premier League striker, and that the club are pleased to have brought him in. Potter went on to say that Wilson has had some issues in terms of injuries and availability. That's a major understatement. But the head coach thinks that West Ham can help him with that, keep him fit. And it's an opportunity to bring someone in who's got the know-how, who's a good character, and who's got a fantastic attitude. And let's hope that is the case. Potter believes that Wilson will fit in well with the team, and he'll be with the young players around. So someone like Callum Marshall perhaps can learn an awful lot from him. And he went on to say that Wilson offers something different to the likes of Nicholas Fulkrug, and they'll complement each other well. So does that mean that in some cases we might see both strikers on the pitch at the same time? Wow, 2 strikers on, a combined age of 65. But hey, experience, eh? He also mentioned that other players available to him as options up front, he name-checked Bowen, Paqueta, and even young Callum Marshall, which is a big indication that the player is not going anywhere this season and will be part of the first team squad, which is great news. Potter confirmed that by saying that the season, he said the season's long, it's good to have different options, and that he's confident that we can get Callum Wilson firing, and that we'll have a really good striker on our hands. And let's hope that really happens. Fingers crossed that Wilson stays fit. Fingers crossed that Wilson proves us all wrong and that he starts banging in the goals. But what this does mean, however, is the end of the West Ham career for Mikel Antonio. When Potter was asked if Antonio was part of next season's plans, he just said a blunt no. What an irony it is that it's taken his best mate, Callum Wilson, to put an end to Antonio's West Ham career. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. Do hit the like button if you've enjoyed the show. Please leave your comments about what you think of our transfer strategy. And does it make sense about Callum Wilson coming in? Do subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all again very soon.